Whoa.
You good?
I'm good.
Okay.
For now.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. How is your energy right now? I can't see you, by the way. I like this. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I'm super excited about this talk. So let me quickly do the introductions. I'm Axel. I'm a product management evangelist at Atlassian. I've been doing product for the past 13 years. Super excited for our talk today. If you want to learn more about what I do and some of the stuff that I share around product management, please feel free to subscribe to my newsletter on axel.pm. Ravi, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Quick history lesson about Ravi. You were born in New York.
Yep.
Grew
New York
up,
City.
Yeah, grew up in Boston. You have 2 daughters, and you were recently captivated by the TV show Adolescence on Netflix.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about that. And talking about adolescence, you were into heavy metal as a teen?
I was into heavy metal as a teenager, yes. A lot of Black Sabbath, a lot of Metallica.
You can't imagine this when you're
No.
on the Reforge website looking at the courses. You can't think heavy metal. I think that's brilliant. And one of your biggest achievements recently has been to introduce your 13-year-old girl to heavy metal.
Yes, but this was by accident. I didn't do it deliberately. I have playlists on Spotify, and she came to me one day, and she's like, Dad, I really like your playlist. And I'm like, which ones? She's like, oh, the Metallica and the Black Sabbath and everything. And so she has gotten very into heavy metal, which is odd for a 13-year-old girl. But
And 6 months ago, something happened.
So 6 months ago, so she got really into it. She started playing guitar, and then she started playing bass. Now she's in a band, and I took her to her first concert, which was by Living Colour, which is an old band from the 90s. They were my first concert, and they were also her first concert 30 years later.
There you go.
That's beautiful. I'm still trying to get my wife into jazz 10 years later.
Yeah.
You have to share some tips with me, please. I'm trying to
Well,
figure
Black
this out.
Sabbath started as like a jazz kind of band.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get her on Black
And to
Sabbath.
get her into Black Sabbath, and then you can move into jazz.
Carlos, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
You are Chief Product Officer at Decathlon, one of France's favorite brands.
Yeah, I've been here for a year now,
Yeah.
joining from Walmart in the US, and very happy to have the experience with Decathlon, our sports company.
Brilliant. So you have 2 boys. You've lived in 6 countries. And you were born on an island, much like myself. You told me you grew up with an interesting perspective on life. You were a fisherman in the morning and a farmer in the afternoon. What did you take from that?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it was a very small island with 7,000 people. The Azores Islands, one of them. And my father's side of the family, they were fishermen, so I helped out in the morning. And my mom's side of the family, they were farmers, so the farms were not that far away. So in the afternoon, I went to help out the family. And obviously, that helps you understand a lot of things, and hard work and discipline, which as a kid, you don't get it, and it's tough. You just want to go and play football, but later in life, it's very rewarding and very good.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being here. I want to start with an observation that I've made in the past, I think, 6 months. In my role, I'm very lucky to be in a position where I can talk to a lot of product teams across the globe. And one of the things that's been a common thread across all of these conversations recently has been... Not sure what's going on here. Has been the level of anxiety a lot of product teams have around AI and around the AI cycle. So I'll speak to teams, product managers who will be telling me, how do I find time to keep up with all of this? How do I use these AI tools? Do I need to upskill on AI? How do I upskill on AI? While having to do my day job, because the job is there and it's, you got to take care of it, right? So to kick us off, I want to ask you, Ravi, what core product management skills remain essential despite everything that's happening with this AI revolution?
Yeah, one answer to that is I think all of them stay essential. I'm not bought into this idea that all of a sudden AI is going to kill product management. If anything, I think that there will be more product managers in the future. If you just think about it purely from a mathematical standpoint, AI is going to have the biggest impact on engineering teams. So engineering teams are going to move faster, and if you want to keep the ratio between product managers and engineers the same, you're going to need more product managers, even if there's a little bit of productivity boost for product managers. So I think we're all in relatively safe positions despite the headlines. The thing that I think is more important than ever is certain things are going to move at the speed of AI, but certain things are going to move at the speed of humans. And the thing that moves at the speed of humans is what product do customers want? What's it going to take them to adopt it? What's going to be your go-to-market? And so all of the things that I think make for a great product manager today, which is having a depth of customer insight, thinking about things strategically, knowing where to build a long-term roadmap, are even more critical with AI. Because we're going to be able to build faster, but figuring out what to build and why to build it is still an open question, and it's going to require those customer-centric, those strategic skills, which AI will help with in terms of gathering information, but it's not going to make the decisions for you. And so I think, if I'm a product manager today, I would say invest in understanding customer insight, invest in understanding strategy, know that product delivery and product execution are going to change, but that's okay. Ultimately, the core job of the product manager is the same.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So if I look at this same question from a different lens, what would you say are the traditional PM skills that are most at risk of becoming less relevant?
Yeah, so I think that if you are more of a project manager than a product manager, then your skills are at risk. So if your job is taking notes and slinging Jira tickets, maybe pulling some reports, doing that sort of thing, those are all things that are going to get much faster, much easier to do with AI if they haven't already. But if you're the sort of product manager who says, okay, yeah, that's part of my job, but ultimately my job is to help the team make good decisions by understanding the customer, by synthesizing things, by making decisions, by understanding the business, figuring out how the decisions are going to impact the business. Those are things that I don't think AI will help with. It'll support. It's not going to replace. And so those are the skills that I would say those are things to invest in and know that they're going to become increasingly important over time.
And one for you, Carlos. Has AI changed the way you build or structure your product teams?
Yeah, for sure. So Decathlon has been on the digital transformation for some while now, and we've seen a lot of data science, ML engineers start to come more in, data product managers. We have a lot of product managers that are focused more on data products. So all of that has helped us evolve and be more prepared for the AI world. Like you said, we have to still understand the product management skills. That's not going to change. The critical thinking, the communications with stakeholders, the understanding the go-to-market. But not only on the way we structure our teams, our AI literacy is one thing that we're very focused on. How do we elevate the knowledge of our team and how they understand AI, the limitations, the potential, and how they can take advantage of it on how they're framing problems and how they're preparing the customer, the discovery and the customer service and all that. So it's not only the new roles that we've seen starting to become more frequent within the organization, but across the entire product organization and the digital organization, elevating our literacy of AI to be better prepared for this new wave of AI.
Is that through upskilling, coaching? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. So we are fortunate to have a lot of great experts and people with our organization. And Decathlon is a company that very focused on the individual and the teammate, as we call it. And community is a very strong component of our organization. So sharing the knowledge, not only formally, but informally.
Like a community of
like
practice.
A good example that I would say is I tried to get in as many, we use Google Product Suite. So I try to get in as many G chats as I can, and there's a big one around generative AI for developers that every time I go in, the number keeps growing. I think it's at 400 right now. And these are the types of things that we do to continue to bring the AI literacy in, to a higher level at the company.
Beautiful. Ravi, this morning you talked about a few questions we should ask ourselves when thinking about AI-enabled products. What practical steps have you seen companies take when they think in a more AI-first way when approaching problems?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to two things. One is understand the AI capabilities it's pretty remarkable what's possible today and what wasn't possible 2 years ago or 5 years ago. But importantly is not to start solution first, like not to say, okay, an LLM can start to do this, or there's this really interesting model that does image detection on this. How do we figure out a use for it? Instead, it's important to know what all the ingredients are and then work backwards from customer problems. So if you look at your product today, there are customer pain points. There's things where people are going outside of your product to get something done. There's things where they have to do repetitive work. There's things where they have cognitive load. So you're asking them to make a decision which they may not understand how to make. So in all of those points of friction within your product today, there are probably some answers from an AI perspective that weren't solvable 18 months ago, but are solvable today. And so the most important thing is to kind of figure out the intersection between those. What is the library of solutions that we have available? What is the prioritized set of the most important unmet customer needs? And let's start to build from there and get new features into the product that solves for those things in a better way than before.
And one of the things I'm really interested in is I've seen a lot of teams now, probably because they have some form of pressure from their management team as well to explore AI or investigate AI. Like, I don't know what that means, but maybe you can help me out here.
Yep.
In these teams, like the ones that you've seen be successful with AI first thinking, how have they like balanced AI capabilities versus other product considerations, right? Because AI is not going to solve everything.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of code is written in traditional software. It's worked well for us for 50 years. It's going to continue to be the case that 95% of the problems that you can solve, you're going to solve with traditional non-learning based software, computational software. And then there's a certain set of things which are necessarily you need to solve with an AI model. And the difference between those is, can you express the rules by which this problem is completed? If so, just solve it in a traditional way. Or can you not express those rules, but you have data that can inform the solution? And so classic example of this is detecting whether or not a photo contains a picture of a bird. If you try to list out the rules that apply to that, it's impossible to do, right? There's always edge cases. Meanwhile, if you have enough photos of birds, you can train an ML model to do that. And that was an intractable problem for decades, and it now is an easily solved problem. And so as you're thinking about things, try to figure out, is this a product problem that can be solved computationally? I know the rules. Or is this a product problem that needs to be solved with an off-the-shelf AI model? Or is this a product problem where there's not even an AI model today that can solve it, but we have the data and we can train our own model? And so that gives you sort of a suite of different ways to tackle problems and figure out a solution that's going to work really well.
So one thing I find is also interesting is, I just talked about this, top-down mandate sometimes, which is teams are getting this message that you need to explore AI. I'm really curious about your position on this. So I speak to a lot of teams, and earlier in the introduction, I talked about this anxiety that a lot of product teams are having because they are scrolling through their LinkedIn feeds and looking at all these demos and thinking, should I be doing these demos? Should I be learning about this stuff? So at Decathlon, how are you seeing the teams engage with this AI topic? Like, are they actors? Are they spectators? Are they coming to you saying, hey, Carlos, we should really be doing this? Or like, how is that thing like panning out at Decathlon?
Yeah, I would say that obviously we have probably both, but I would say that we're definitely actors. Mm-hmm. And as a company, for the last couple of years, and the previous CEO, Barbara, invested a lot in AI and how can AI help achieve our goals. So we've seen a lot of grassroots approach. We've seen our chief data officer also invest a lot in our capabilities. Some of our product suites are more prone for it. So for instance, value chain and everything we're doing from a demand forecasting and dispatch logic, heavily driven by AI automated driven flows. We're also flirting with multiple dimensions like pricing and automated flows in store. So some of them comes from strategic logic, and it's asked for the teams to go invest and create what would be our AI roadmap or our AI strategy. Mm-hmm. But then we start seeing popping left and right, teams starting to experiment. And to the point that probably we were talking about earlier, this is where we have to be careful and balance with, hey, what are you trying to solve? What is the purpose of bringing in AI? Because we probably can see a little bit of what we've seen with technology at some point, which was a shiny object. And technology is cool. Let's do technology for the sake of doing technology. AI and other things, but now we're talking about AI, kind of follows the same pattern. And people get excited. And now with the accessibility and the availability of tools and technology, it's easier than ever for teams to start experimenting and playing. Decathlon, as you asked the question, Decathlon is very driven by sports and sports experience. So we are very driven by mission. So everything we do, independently of AI, technology, process re-engineering, everything has to be tied up to the process. And this is something that we always try our teams to remember and cross-check, hey, what you're doing is going to add to the value of the company and the customers we're trying to solve for, or is just for the sake of doing something cool.
Tying the work to the outcomes.
To the purpose, completely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ravi, I think this is a great question for you, actually. You recently launched the very first AI strategy course on Reforge, right? The launch was 2 weeks ago?
It was about 5 weeks ago.
5 weeks ago?
So it's a 4-week course. I just finished up.
Right. So how many people were in the first cohort?
We had over 1,000.
Over 1,000 people. Okay. What did you think when you launched this course and you did the first cohort? What were some of the highlights, the type of questions people were asking? I think it's a great insight into like what are some of the senior ICs or senior product leaders across the globe looking for when they sign up to this course on Reforge?
Yeah, I think the core problem we were trying to solve with the course is AI is really hard. It's very competitive out there. I was just talking to someone recently who's a founder who's got a really interesting business that's growing really in a healthy way, quarter over quarter, but they're having some challenges raising their seed round because VCs are like, it's such a busy market. We don't know what bets to place. And if they find a bet they really like, they're putting all their capital into that one thing. And there's lots of great companies that are not getting capital. Meanwhile, established companies are trying to figure out what do we need to do with AI? How do we make sure that we're not disrupted? And the big companies, they've learned their lesson. They're not sitting on the sidelines as this tech shift happens. They're jumping in full force. And so it's a much more volatile and dynamic market than it's ever been before. And rather than, as I talked about today, rather than AI creating all this blue ocean opportunity, it's a lot more intense. And so we wanted to answer the question for people of, what do you do in that? How do you craft a product strategy that is really going to stand out? I went through one of the frameworks that we go through in the course. I think another thing that was an interesting topic that came up was, what should my roadmap look like? And one of the things that we talked about in the course is it's very hard to compete as a horizontal tool. So if you're doing a horizontal tool that is for data analysis across all sorts of use cases, or note-taking like Granola or other ones, ChatGPT and Claude are these horizontally incredibly powerful products. Like, think about it. We've never had a single product where you could go in, analyze a spreadsheet, plan a vacation, and get therapy all in the same product, right? So that is an insanely hard thing for us as product builders to compete on.
I don't know what this says about the product itself.
And the therapy thing I joke about, but there was recently a study that came out, and it's actually one of the top things that people are doing with ChatGPT. And so if we're competing with this kind of horizontal product, how do we create something that works better for people? How do we create a better travel research assistant than what ChatGPT can do? How do we create a better online therapy or AI-based therapy than what ChatGPT can do? And so one of the things we talk about in the program is to go vertical. Find your focus. It could be focus on a particular domain, like legal. It could be focus on a particular type of user. Granola, as I talked about earlier today, has a focus on a particular type of note taker. They're not going after anyone that takes notes. They're going after a particular person that takes pride in their notes and sees their notes as a core part
Basically,
of their
everybody
job.
in this room, I
Yes,
suppose.
absolutely. And so finding a vertical focus is incredibly important. And then if you want to move more horizontal, you can do that from there. But AI is an inherently horizontal, general purpose technology. And if you're not clear about what your focus is, it's going to be that much harder to create a 10x product versus what someone can go to ChatGPT for or Claude for and just get it off the shelf.
Okay, talking about note-taking, I'm going to recommend that you take notes because I'm going to ask Ravi a question now, and you might want to take notes for this. In a second, I'm going to ask you the same question about AI tools that you use on a daily basis. Ravi, there's two parts to this question. Are there any resources you would recommend for the audience, if they are curious about everything AI and how it relates to product management. And the second one is tools. Which tools are you using, or are you seeing people use that are having like a 10x impact on what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Carlos talked about AI literacy. I think that's the first place to start. It doesn't mean you need to go and build your own model, but there's really good influencers. Andre Karpathy is one of them. There's another person named Nicholas Renat that have great YouTube videos or great sort of breakdowns of how does transformer technology work? What exactly is generative AI? What's happening within the language model? What's happening within the image diffuser?
We talked about Peter Yang.
Peter Yang is great for specifically applied to product. And so I think it's very important that you spend some time using the tools, that you spend some time understanding the technology so that you can get a sense of how this works and how your particular data and your functionality can work with the tools. Another thing I recommend is just doing some vibe coding. Like go in to V0 or Cursor or even Claude and ChatGPT and create some things and see what the code looks like that it generates. If you can't write code, that's totally fine. You can ask the AI to explain it to you. But I think it's important to understand how these APIs work, particularly agentic APIs, like understanding what does an agent do, how does it hand off to a tool, how does it hand off to other agents. These are all things that as a product leader we haven't had to think about before because that's been in the domain of engineering. But I think the line between what is on the product side and what is on the engineering side in terms of leveraging this technology is blurring. And so it's, I think, important and really valuable to be a little bit closer to the technology and to understand how it works. So that's the first thing that I would suggest. Another interesting article is Steve Wolfram has a really good article on how transformers work. I think it's like a 40 or 50 page article, but I highly recommend it.
Then you put it in an AI and you ask it to summarize it for you.
I would read through it. It's actually a fast read for as long an article as it is. And it does a great job of walking through the very first steps in machine learning and how we got to where we are today. And then in terms of tools, like I tend to use the tools everyone else is using. I'm using ChatGPT all the time. I'm using Claude all the time. I also use Cursor for coding. I use V0 for doing front-end coding. I use Granola for note-taking. One that I learned about recently that Dave is going to be talking about right now is Super Whisperer for doing voice.
Super Whisper is very, very
voice
cool.
notes. So yeah, there's so many good tools out there. And if you find the right tool and you can plug it into your processes, it really is game-changing. For me, almost everything goes through AI in some way. For me today, I'm using the tools multiple times an hour, and it used to be a couple times a week.
Brilliant, thank you. Carlos, what tools are you finding you're using on a regular basis when it comes to the AI revolution?
Yeah, so that's a great question. At Decathlon, we use Google Suite.
Yep.
So we're seeing everyone pop up with ChatGPT and other tools, and we decided to partner up with Google. So we use Gemini, and it's like you mentioned, it's day to day. We use it all the time in our product managers. Not only our product managers, all our teams are starting to use it, taking advantage of it for some of the more mundane tasks, but also starting to experiment with a lot of more complicated things and getting the AI literacy up. So when they're jumping into solving actual problems, they're in a different stage. Mm-hmm. Going back to some of the suggestions you made for content and things out there, I'm probably a little bit older than you, but I had the fortune at some point to meet Andrew Yang. And I worked with him at Walmart for a year. He, as a consultant, obviously, he didn't work for Walmart. But if you're not familiar with Andrew Yang, he's the founder of Coursera, and he has probably the most seen course
AI
out
course,
there,
yeah.
AI for Everyone. If you haven't checked it out, it's a classic, but take a look at it. He did wonders for Walmart from an AI literacy perspective. Mm-hmm. We brought him in not only for the teams itself, but from the executive committee perspective. And especially at companies like Decathlon, where not everyone is digital aware, and a retailer requires a change program, an education program across the entire organization to elevate the game. Mm-hmm. It's not only about the digital teams. The digital teams by their own can more or less find their way.
Yep.
It's all about how do we educate the partners that build solutions with us, from operations, from supply chain, from the sports products creation teams. So Gemini Advanced is the one the poison that we selected to enable our teams to
And on a personal side, anything you've been using you find is interesting, or in the family?
I would say that. I would say I cannot say it out public because this might come back to me. But I do also use a lot of ChatGPT.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't really?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm gonna go back to you, Ravi. I think there's something really interesting that's also happening now in the craft of product, and I mean product in its broader sense. So recently, at Atlassian, there was this principal designer from the Trello team who went on, Lenny's now a podcast network.
Yep.
And he has a new show with Clevo called How I AI, right? So Joel, one of my colleagues, went onto the show and he explained how, as a designer, he uses mockups that he's creating in Figma and how he uses Cursor and other AI tools to have better conversations with engineering teams. So he's not like building things to hand them and production-ready code, obviously not. And one of the things I see is happening is when I speak to engineers and I speak to designers about what is currently happening with AI and a lot of these AI tools and the impact it will probably have on their jobs, there's usually two groups of people. One group of people doesn't even want to engage in the conversation, and there's a lot of I can sense there's a lot of anxiety and fear there, is this going to replace my job? I don't believe in this. It doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And then the other group is actually really leaning in, and they want to understand how can they adapt because this AI thing is not going away, right? So we had this conversation recently with a few colleagues where you will speak to people around you, especially from a product perspective. I honestly think we live in a bubble. And you will hear people say things like, yeah, but design is a bottleneck. Engineering is a bottleneck. And now with these tools, this bottleneck effect is being mitigated, right? How do you think these teams are going to be successful, and how do you see them adapting to all of these new workflows and new tools coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that's changing is the prototype is the new spec or PRD. If you can, before it used to be that you have to write a Google Doc and then, you hand it over to design and they create wireframes, they ultimately create detailed designs, and then they hand it over to engineering, and it was much more of a linear process. I think now it's going to be much more of a fluid process. If you can write a spec, you can write a really good prompt for one of these vibe coding tools, get some live code up and running. The goal here is not to replace engineering. That's not happening anytime soon. But it's really to say, how can I get the closest representation of what I think we need to build so that we as a team can talk about it and iterate on it. And the analogy I like to use is if you were going to build a house, you would never accept from your architect a memo on what house your architect is going to build you, right? How much confusion would that lead to? You'd have no idea where the bathroom's going to be or where the living room is going to be if it was just in a memo,
Here's a one-pager for you.
Yeah, exactly, right? The one-pager is not going to work. But what will work is a blueprint. And so, a blueprint will help you kind of understand the overall layout. And that's what wireframes did for us. Yeah. But what will work even better is a 3D model that you can walk through in virtual reality. And that is what a prototype can do for us. And so you get much closer to what the final representation is going to look like. And then that enables teams to collaborate a lot better. And I think the problem is people feel like there's some toe stepping that's going on with that. There's some unease of, isn't that design's job or isn't that engineering's job? I think we need to get all over that. Understand that the tools are here to work in a different way, and make sure that as a group we can get as close to what we want to build as quickly as possible, informed by customers, and then we can iterate on it. And in that way, you're going to get a much better output, which is even more important with AI because AI is a probabilistic system. So if you're just looking at a wireframe and you're not actually seeing how is the model going to respond for an AI-based features, you're never really understanding it until your code is live. So rather than doing that in production or as close to production, do that earlier, do that in the prototype phase.
What are you seeing on your side, Carlos, from the interaction of product engineering design and how AI is fitting in this picture?
Yeah, I know this is a great answer, and especially because in my past we come from the world of F specs, 3 months, 6 months analysis of those F specs. So that, as with technology along the years, have changed, and now with AI, this is the acceleration is tremendous to be able to see the prototypes, and really appreciate you saying that. From the Decathlon side, we have been in the digital transformation for some while now, and we created a model of working that gets together multiple functions. We call it the four in a box, and we are finding our way on how they collaborate. And so right now we're in the process of revisiting that concept and understand how to move forward with it. Because like you said, it's not like the fundamentals are going to go away from a product management, product design. There's design professionals have their mindset and the way they think about problems, and they're complementary to engineering and to product professionals. But there's going to be a place that we'll have to find this way of gelling and leveraging on the tools that we don't feel that we're stepping on everyone's space, and we tied out to our purpose and what we're trying to build and solve versus my turf, your turf, and his turf. So I think this is a lot on us leaders to find this playground to enable the teams to stop fighting, and also if you jump into, this is a team, if you jump then into cross collaboration in multiple domains and portfolios, it escalates, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So at Decathlon, right now we're very focused on understanding our model of operating and understanding the different functions and how the AI tools come into place, and they help us create this new way of working that enables the teams to stop discussing what's my role, what's your role, and right, so refocus on the purpose and what we're trying to solve for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're going to start a round of Q&A in about 4 minutes. Lightning round for both of you. What single piece of advice would you give to a product manager just starting to work with AI?
The first thing I would say is just use it. Use it for everything. If you don't even think you have a need for it, just try it out. I'm constantly surprised at what it can do. My wife recently had to do a spreadsheet. She had 50 different receipts, and somebody asked her to do a spreadsheet, and she's like, oh, I don't know if I want to spend 2 hours going through all of these receipts and putting together the spreadsheet. I just don't feel like doing that right now. And I was like, honey, give me the receipts. We took all 50 of the receipts, dragged them into ChatGPT, and said, hey, make a spreadsheet out of this. It went through every single receipt, did the optical character recognition on the receipt, put together the spreadsheet with the name of the item, the cost of the item, categorization, so she didn't even have to do categorization, summed it all up, and in 12 minutes, because AI took a little time to do its work, we had the output. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. Let me just try it. Let me see if I can be the person that tries to save the day, not knowing whether or not it would actually work. But it did. And that was actually the first time she was like, oh, actually, this AI thing is interesting.
Brilliant. Carlos.
Yeah, on my side, I would say that obviously elevate your AI literacy so you're better prepared. But don't forget the product fundamentals, because problem framing, discovery, understanding, and empathizing with your customers, because when you're going to ask those questions to AI, you have to clearly frame a problem that AI can solve for. So don't go too left on the AI component and forget about the product fundamentals, because they go together. Another thing that I would stress out, which is something that at Decathlon we've been discussing a lot lately, is please do not fall on the trap to forget about the data quality. Because for everything we want to do from an AI perspective, if you don't have good quality of data coming in, the outputs and eventually the business outcomes you're trying to achieve, you're not going to be able to do it. And sometimes as product teams and people, we think that's the role of data governance and the role of the data teams. And I would invite you to not think like that and own the responsibility of clear KPIs, clear definition of those objects, and make sure that the sources of data are unanimous across the system. So we're not creating a legacy and a tech debt that down the road when AI even becomes bigger, then we have to go back and clean it up.
Thank you. I think we have a microphone here. Thank you so much. So somebody's going to run a microphone around the room. If you have any questions for our guests, please raise your hand. Somebody down there. Do you mind lighting up the room, please? Thank you.
Hello. Hi. I'm Anna from France Television, as you can hear on my accent. So I have a question about your usage of AI, and how do you, if you have, kind of an ecological guidelines on when you use AI, given the impact it has?
In terms of when you use it in your product or when you use it for your personal productivity?
Product and personal.
Okay. Personally, I try to use it all the time now. I say, okay, let me try it. If it works, I'll spend 10 minutes figuring it out. Great, I might learn something. I might learn something new that it can do, and that's really helpful. And if I learn that it can't do that, that's okay. I've just spent a little bit of time on it. And so I'll go with AI first, whether it's writing something, trying to do an analysis, trying to do a calculation, trying to generate copy, those sorts of things. I think in the product, the time to use it is to think about, do I want to solve this problem computationally, or do I want to solve it with a learning system? And computational systems behave completely different than learning systems. So a few things, right? Computational systems are deterministic. They always do the same thing every single time. Sometimes that's a benefit. Learning systems are probabilistic. They do a different thing every time. Sometimes that's a benefit. If you're generating images, maybe you want different images each time. If you're generating marketing copy, maybe you want some different variations. But if you're running some financial calculations, you don't want it to be probabilistic. You want it to be deterministic. So that's one area.
Sorry, let me interrupt. I think what Anna was asking is, how do you factor in ecology, the environment,
impact on the environment
when choosing when to use or not to use AI? Like recently, Sam Altman from OpenAI said, "You guys are saying thank you at the end of each request. It's costing us billions." Like,
stop being polite.
Yeah, stop being polite. Like, how do you factor that in, and how are you seeing companies thinking about the environmental impact of using all of these tools? Because it's quite compute heavy, right?
And I think it actually goes back to the same answer, which is computational versus learning.
Yeah.
Don't use a learning approach if a computational approach will solve the problem, because the learning approach has a bunch of drawbacks and it's very expensive. It's ecologically expensive, it's financially expensive, and it's usually not necessary. And so too often now, like, people are saying, oh, I'm going to do this prompt and like I'll get an output from the AI, and you could just spend a little bit of time and write some code to do the same thing. And so I would say, both from a business standpoint as PMs, as well as from an ecological standpoint, try to use it in as few ways as possible. And when you are using it, put it within a computational engine and figure out when is the right place to delegate to AI and when is the right place where we can solve this with a rules-based system. And that will help to keep the financial impact and the ecological impact limited. Once you open up the floodgates in a chat-based tool, it's a little hard to say to the user, you can use it for this or you can't use it for that. But I think that's all the more reason is to not default to chat as the main interface for UI, but actually to use your product as the main interface to your AI, and your product can figure out when to orchestrate it.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that, because Decathlon being a French company and very planet-driven and conscious, it all starts with the company culture and the company strategy. And right now, we're probably at an early stage from our AI strategy, but we are right now, for the last couple of months, within our executive team, creating our AI guidelines and policy. So we're putting a lot of attention to it to make sure we're responsible and we're taking care of the planet. And we're working very close with some of the European Union suggestions, and we're not doing this in isolation, but if you follow a little bit of what Decathlon has been doing from a circular economy and a CO2 footprint, we are carrying over that commitment into our AI strategy and how we approach AI.
Thank you.
Other thing there is, like, sometimes you can do batch processing. So if you don't need an answer right away for your user, you can do batch processing, which OpenAI or Anthropic will actually run that at a time where it's not at peak, and then they'll be able to use excess energy to do that.
That's good to know. We have a question. So I think there was somebody down there, if they still want to ask a question. Otherwise, there's a gentleman at the back there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, mine was kind of redundant. I was more like concerned about the mass consumption. If we go through like industrialization and making decisions in this bubble that is AI. So it was kind of answer, so I don't want to be redundant. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody at the back there, and then there's somebody at the back on the right side as well.
Hello. I'm Valentin from Decathlon too, and I would like to ask a question because...
No trick questions, please.
We stage this.
When using new AI tools, how to make it accepted in the largest group, because sometimes it takes time to have new tools accepted, and we know that AI is growing very fast, and we need to be curious and to always try things, and how to handle between security and having the new tool and being on top of AI?
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. So first of all, as I mentioned before, always drive with a purpose. So within the problems we're trying to solve at Decathlon, where does AI fit versus doing it in isolation? So the same rules that apply to building products should apply to building our AI products. And then it also comes back to piloting, experimenting, understanding how to scale, and with that, the adoption phase for our customers. And so in our case, we're doing a lot for the store teammates. So there's clear programs of change management and adoption for that. Also for the forecasting that applies to the demand planners and the entire value chain. So it goes hand in hand, but it's no different from building a product. So it's not the AI a little bit different here, is completing the product life cycle from ideation, solutioning, launching to market, piloting, scaling, adoption, and change management.
Thank you. Somebody back there,
Hello.
I think.
I'm Giorgio Celios from ESSEC Business School. And I would like to ask, because specifically for product management, we see the usage of generative AI. In a lot of cases, when it comes to generative AI and reviewing its contents, you can refine and redefine your prompt again and again, which does fall under the same consideration as if we go by prompt standards, what you consider a minimum viable product of a prompt that you are willing to iterate in your work. And a lot of people do have the same issue in product management always. What would be considered the minimum viable product for you to be efficient without wasting more time and more resources at this process in order to defeat those bottlenecks that were aforementioned?
Do you use Anthropic Console?
I don't. You told me about it for the first time yesterday.
So I'll talk a little bit about this because I think this is super interesting. So I don't know if you know this, but Anthropic, the makers of Claude, have another product that you have to pay for separately, but my opinion is it's totally worth it. It's called console.anthropic.com. And on there, there's a list of 6 or 7 tools. One of these tools is a prompt generator. So a conversation we were having recently is, I'm sure, how many of you here have read an article online that says you absolutely need to learn about prompt engineering? Right. I would argue that it makes no sense for us to learn prompt engineering with all of this AI power that we have. Makes no sense. So Anthropic built a prompt generator where you write a very basic, simple English sentence and say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, just a one-liner. And from that one-liner, it will build the perfect prompt for what you're trying to do. So part of the answer to your question there is this kind of like upfront cost of having to think about how do I write this prompt so I get the right output out of it as an MVP like first is really just using the tools that are available to you, and one of them is the prompt generator. There's another tool there which is called a prompt optimizer. Now this one is pretty impressive. I don't know if you've used it here, but you put the prompt that it's generated first, and then it will show you different versions of the output based on different iterations on the prompt itself. This helps you, we talked a lot about AI literacy, this helps you understand basically where you should set the bar for yourself in terms of what you need to learn and what you don't need to learn. I hope this partly, hopefully, answered your question.
That answers a big part of the question, especially for the input part.
Mm-hmm.
But what about, of course, the output? Like someone can keep prompting it because the output is not sufficient enough. Like what would be a sufficient output without hallucinations to the point of not wasting more time creating more outputs and reviewing them, which would, again, take many, many, many hours, really.
Do you want to take this?
So I think part of this is, in your own product, is to think about how you're going to do reinforcement learning. So for one example, ChatGPT will actually create 2 different versions of an output for you and ask you which one you prefer. The goal being to understand user preferences so that the next time they don't have to do that. And so that creates a really nice feedback cycle where you can get reinforcement feedback. You get the initial prompt as an input, and then you could feed both of that into the model to figure out what is the right output so you can get it right on the first time versus having to have the user run it over and over again or ask clarifying questions. Because typically if they're running the prompt more than one time, they're just not getting what they expect out of it. And so that's an opportunity to optimize from a product perspective.
We have time for one more question. Somebody down here.
Hello, my name is Alex from FactSet. Thanks a lot for all those great ideas about things to try and who are the thought leaders. Just wanted to double down on agents. It's a little bit like it's all the rage about agents these days. Any practical advice on how to get started using it?
I'm going to revert to the expert here.
Yeah.
So I think agents are really interesting. The word agent has sort of been stretched beyond recognition, and so it's being used in a lot of different cases. I think about an agent as being an autonomous system that has multiple different roles and that can use tools. And so the thing that I would recommend to kind of get started is there's some off-the-shelf products that you can use to create your own agents or agent-like systems. Gumloop is one of those examples. So you can play around with that. The other thing is, I think just vibe coding using the agent SDK from OpenAI is a really good way to get familiar with it. One of the ways to think about agents today, and it will change over time, is each entity in an agent is really just using a different prompt. And so an agent allows you to have multiple different roles that are using different prompts, and then they could talk to each other and hand things off to each other. The context window for the AI is really important. Like, you can't have context from multiple different roles within the same prompt and expect the AI to do a good job. So by separating those concerns and having different entities that can talk to each other, you can then get something that is more agentic. The other thing that I think is interesting is the AI can actually create a plan. And so the first step in response to a request, rather than answering the request, might be to ask some follow-up questions. Then it's to create a plan of work. Then it's to execute each step in the plan.
And you can see that more and more in the reasoning models as well, right?
Yeah, you can absolutely. Like, if you go in and you use O3, if you turn on deep research especially, you can see the process that it's going through to create that plan. You can do all of that using an agent SDK like the OpenAI agent SDK. OpenAI also has some really good tools for being able to trace your agent, so you can see which agent is working with which context and have things kind of know where it's handing off to each other. So my suggestion is there's a lot of language about it. It's really ultimately about autonomy, planning, use of tools, and the best way to get familiar with it is just to start playing with the tech, and that's easier than ever with some of the vibe coding tools.
Thank you both. Please give our guests a great round of applause. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and please come find us if you want to chat after this.